Fear has a strange way of making tomorrow look bigger than it really is. It can convince a strong person that they're weak, a prepared person that they're not ready, and a capable person that they should stay exactly where they are. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It whispers that you're too late. It whispers that someone else is more talented. It whispers that if you fail this time, you'll never recover. And because it speaks in your own voice, you begin to believe it's telling the truth. But here's what I've learned. Fear is one of the worst advisors you'll ever listen to. It has one job: to protect you from discomfort. The problem is that the life you've been praying for often lives on the other side of discomfort. The opportunities you've been waiting for usually require a step you don't feel ready to take. The person you're meant to become cannot be built by staying inside the walls that fear has constructed around your life. Every person carries two conversations inside their mind. One voice says, stay where it's safe. Don't take the risk. Don't speak up. Don't try again. The other voice quietly says, take one more step. You don't need all the answers. Just keep moving. Every day, those two voices compete for control. Your future is determined by which one you choose to obey. Faith is often misunderstood. Many people think faith means believing that nothing difficult will ever happen. That's not faith. Faith doesn't promise an easy road. Faith gives you the courage to keep walking when the road becomes difficult. It allows you to move before everything makes sense. It gives you the strength to continue when the evidence around you hasn't caught up with the hope inside you. I remember a season when every door I expected to open stayed closed. Plans fell apart. Opportunities disappeared. The future that seemed so clear suddenly became uncertain. I kept asking myself what I had done wrong. Maybe I wasn't talented enough. Maybe I had missed my chance. Maybe this was all I was ever going to become. Looking back now, I realized something important. Those closed doors didn't destroy my future. They redirected it. If every plan had worked exactly the way I wanted, I would have settled for something much smaller than what I was capable of becoming. Sometimes disappointment isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's the beginning of a better one. Think about a pilot flying through thick clouds. There are moments when the pilot can't clearly see the destination. Visibility disappears. The sky looks uncertain. But the pilot doesn't abandon the flight because of temporary clouds. The pilot trusts the instruments, follows the training, and keeps moving in the right direction until the clouds finally break. Your life will have seasons like that. There will be days when you cannot clearly see what's ahead. That's when faith becomes more valuable than certainty. Fear always demands proof before action. Faith chooses action before proof appears. Fear says, what if everything goes wrong? Faith asks, what if this challenge is preparing me for something greater? That single change in perspective can transform an entire life. One of the greatest battles you'll ever fight isn't against another person. It's against the version of yourself that constantly expects the worst. The version that imagines failure before taking the first step. The version that gives fear more authority than possibility. Every meaningful dream requires you to defeat that version of yourself. Notice how fear steals your future one small decision at a time. It tells you not to apply for the opportunity because someone else is probably better. It tells you not to start the business because you might lose money. It tells you not to have the difficult conversation because you might be rejected. It tells you not to chase the dream because you might fail. Then years pass. And one day you realize the greatest pain wasn't failure. It was never finding out what could have happened if you had been brave enough to try. Regret is often more painful than failure because failure teaches. Regret only asks questions you'll never be able to answer. Faith doesn't remove fear. It simply refuses to let fear become the leader. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that something else is more important than fear. A firefighter feels fear, but enters the burning building because saving a life matters more. A parent feels fear, but sacrifices for their children because love is greater than fear. A person pursuing their purpose feels uncertainty, but continues because the vision of who they for can become is stronger than the comfort of staying the same. I've noticed something about people who build meaningful lives. They don't wait until fear disappears. If they waited, they would never move. Instead, they learn to carry fear without allowing it to control their direction. They acknowledge it, but they don't obey it. Imagine a sailor crossing the ocean. The sailor cannot control the wind. Some days the wind is favorable. Other days storms appear without warning. But the sailor doesn't spend all day complaining about the weather. The sailor adjusts the sails. That's what faith does. It teaches you to adjust instead of surrender. It teaches you that while you may not control every circumstance, you always control your response. There will be moments when you question yourself. There will be nights when your confidence feels smaller than your problems. During those moments, remember that every strong person you admire has stood where you're standing now. They also doubted. They also struggled. They also wondered if they were enough. The difference is that they refused to let those moments become permanent. Your future isn't asking you to be fearless. It's asking you to be faithful. Faithful to your purpose. Faithful to your values. Faithful to the work that needs to be done today. You don't have to know how every chapter of your life will unfold. You only need enough courage to write the next page. Maybe today your next step is making one phone call you've been avoiding. Maybe it's beginning the project you've been postponing. Maybe it's forgiving someone so your heart can become lighter. Maybe it's believing in yourself again after a season of disappointment. Whatever that next step is, take it. Because every meaningful journey begins with one decision that fear tried to stop. One day you'll look back and realize that the biggest turning points in your life weren't the moments when you felt completely confident. They were the moments when you chose faith over fear. They were the moments when you stepped forward without guarantees. They were the moments when you trusted that your present uncertainty did not define your future. And that's where real transformation begins. And once you make that decision, something begins to change inside you. Not because every problem suddenly disappears, but because you stop measuring your future by your fears. You begin measuring it by your purpose. That is the moment your life starts moving in a different direction. The circumstances around you may still look the same, but the person facing those circumstances is no longer the same. Fear wants you to believe that every setback is the end of the story. Faith reminds you that every chapter has another page. One bad day is not your life. One failure is not your identity. One rejection is not your future. Never allow one moment to define a lifetime. Think about a seed buried beneath the ground. If you judged its future by what you could see, you would assume nothing was happening. But beneath the surface, roots are forming. Strength is developing. Life is preparing to break through. Some seasons of your life will feel exactly like that. You'll work hard without recognition. You'll stay disciplined without immediate results. You'll keep believing when there is little visible evidence that anything is changing. Don't mistake hidden progress for no progress. The strongest foundations are built where nobody can see them. I once met a man who had spent years building a small business. He wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy. There were months when he barely made enough to keep going. Friends told him to quit and find something easier. Some even laughed at his dream. But every morning he unlocked the same door, turned on the same lights, and continued doing the work. He wasn't driven by applause. He was driven by belief. Years later, that same business became successful. People called him lucky. They said he had perfect timing. They admired what he had built, but they never saw the years when faith was the only thing keeping him moving forward. That's the reality of success. People celebrate the harvest. They rarely respect the seasons of planting. Faith teaches you to keep planting even when the harvest isn't visible yet. There will always be people who allow fear to decide their future. They stay in jobs they no longer believe in because change feels risky. They never start the business because someone else might do it better. They never speak the words that need to be spoken because rejection feels too painful. Slowly, fear builds a prison without walls. The tragedy is that many people spend years protecting themselves from failure while also protecting themselves from growth. You cannot become the person you were created to be while making every decision based on comfort. Growth has always required courage. Every breakthrough begins with uncertainty. Every victory begins with a risk. Every transformation begins with one decision to move before everything feels safe. Faith does not guarantee comfort. It guarantees direction. When you know where you're going, temporary storms no longer convince you to turn around. Imagine driving through a long tunnel. For a while, all you see is darkness. The walls seem endless. The light at the end feels impossibly far away. But no one builds a home inside a tunnel. You keep driving because you know tunnels are designed to be passed through, not lived in. Some of you are treating temporary seasons like permanent destinations. You're living inside fear because you've forgotten that difficult seasons eventually end. Keep moving. Keep believing. Keep taking the next step. The light becomes visible to those who refuse to stop driving. One of the greatest habits you can build is learning to speak truth to yourself instead of listening to every fearful thought that enters your mind. Not every thought deserves your agreement. Fear says you're not enough. Truth says you're still growing. Fear says you'll never recover. Truth says you've survived difficult seasons before. Fear says you're too late. Truth says today is still an opportunity. The conversation inside your mind eventually becomes the direction of your life. Guard that conversation carefully. Feed your mind with hope instead of hopelessness. Feed it with purpose instead of panic. Feed it with action instead of excuses. Another lesson life teaches is that faith grows through action, not just intention. You don't become courageous by wishing for courage. You become courageous by acting while you're still afraid. Every difficult conversation you have, every opportunity you pursue, every challenge you face, every promise you keep, those moments strengthen your confidence because they become evidence that fear doesn't prod. The final word. The people you admire most were never completely fearless. They simply reached a point where their purpose became louder than their fear. And you can reach that point too. Not tomorrow, not someday, today. Choose to believe that your current struggle is not your permanent identity. Choose to believe that your mistakes can become lessons instead of life sentences. Choose to believe that the future can be greater than the past. Choose to believe that discipline, patience, and perseverance will eventually produce results. Because belief changes behavior. Behavior changes habits. Habits change character. And character changes destiny. Years from now, you won't remember every obstacle that tried to stop you. But you'll remember the moment you decided to stop letting fear make your decisions. You'll remember the day you finally applied for the opportunity. The day you started the business. The day you forgave. The day you chose to trust again. The day you stood back up after failure. Those moments become the turning points of a meaningful life. Remember this. Fear will always give you reasons to stay where you are. Faith will always give you a reason to keep moving. Fear focuses on what you might lose. Faith focuses on who you might become. Fear keeps your world small. Faith expands your vision. Fear asks for guarantees before taking the first step. Faith understands that many of life's greatest rewards are discovered only after the first step is taken. So when tomorrow arrives and uncertainty tries to speak louder than your purpose, remember who you are becoming. Don't allow temporary emotions to cancel permanent dreams. Don't surrender your future because today's path feels difficult. Walk forward anyway. Trust anyway. Build anyway. Learn anyway. Serve anyway. Love anyway. Keep showing up anyway. Because the life you've been hoping for isn't waiting on the other side of perfect circumstances. It's waiting on the other side of your decision to choose faith over fear. And one day, when you stand where you once dreamed of standing, you'll realize something beautiful. It wasn't that fear disappeared. It was that your faith became stronger than it. And from that moment on, fear no longer controlled your future. It simply became another obstacle that your faith had already learned to overcome.